No, here we
Steven.
go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Twitch Numbers. I'm your host, Colin Connors. With me, as always, is my wonderful co-host slash surprise co-host, Alicia Garza.
Hello.
Also joining
I
us
don't
today,
want to kill Colin right now. It's
uh,
fine.
also joining us today is the very beautiful Stephen Lehman
Well, thank you, Colin.
and the man from Pennsylvania, Prince Ty.
Good evening.
All right, guys, we have a fair amount to discuss. It was all the episodes this season, in my opinion, have been pretty good. To me, I would say this was a lower tier one of the season, but it still got the job done. It still, got my Survivor. It scratched at least
I
for
thought it was an
today.
important episode.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty
It
important
was
episode
an
as well.
important episode in the sense. Okay, that's a very nerdy reference. It was a stepping stone episode, in my opinion. It sets up for a lot of dramatic things to come. So we're gonna get to all of that. But first, I am gonna come with you, Alicia. Okay? Why is it tonight?
You are going to come with me. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
I want to talk with you about just Julia's overall gameplay. And were you impressed at all by her whole like, I'm a young girl, I did a good job, or do you think age shouldn't be a qualifier like in the game
I'm not
Survivor?
really impressed. I guess I'm impressed with how well she took it at the end. That she was like, I've learned a lot about myself and I've grown with the game or something. So I was impressed that like that's how she chose to like take the experience and like portray herself. I wasn't really impressed with her like gameplay as an actual player. I feel like her youngness was also kind of green and it because she came off like really not very subtle or very like sneaky and good at like pulling things off. But that could just be because that's her personality. Like maybe she's just not very.
And I actually think that her age did play a factor, but what was really interesting in time, I'm actually going to bridge this to you, is we saw a striking parallel because Julia was getting in mad trouble for playing both sides. Meanwhile, you have Sydney basically talking and explaining how she's playing both sides, and no one cares because she's not
Sydney
getting
and
called
Michelle.
at it. Yes, Sydney and Michelle.
Both of
So,
them.
Ty, what separates Sydney and Michelle from the Julia on like just a kind of like an analytical level?
I feel like there is subtlety there. Like Michelle had a comment tonight, and it was that I'm really good at building social connections and like basically making people feel comfortable with her. And Julia didn't do any of that. Julia just basically came out and was just like, hey, I'm going to go ahead and sit over here with the guys and laugh at everything that they say while you're watching me do it. But don't worry, everything's okay. And then was surprised when everything was not okay for her. Like there's just no subtlety there. I don't know if it's an age thing. I just personally think the other two girls are smarter than she is and are playing it better. We know that Sydney is like super smart. She mentioned her academic credentials right around merge time. I mean, they are, they're playing well. They are the top two contenders.
And I do think part of that too is Michelle, and I'm going to bring this to Stephen. Michelle was also left out of that vote, which I didn't realize she was until the episode opened. And Michelle's reaction to being left out was vastly different from Julia's. Michelle was just like, okay, I'm going to keep calm and carry on. Stephen, go ahead. What did you want to bring to the table?
I was just going to say, with reference to separating the Julia from the Michelle and Sydney, Julia put strategy first with people when she was playing both sides. She didn't make it seem like she was trying to get to know them as people. She was just flat out like, okay, I have other options, strategy, let's go. And to me, that's reminiscent, and this sounds a little elitist, but like a new school fan, someone who like comes in after heroes, villains, who's like, game, strategy, like a Spencer Bledsoe.
You gotta dig, Steven.
Yeah,
You gotta dig.
Whereas Michelle and Sydney, I don't necessarily know if they're big fans, but I think they at least have the wherewithal to realize this is primarily a social game. People want to work with you if they like you. So maybe you should build those bridges first and then try to cross them after, rather than haphazardly build it, try to cross it, fall into a river.
And that's very good. I think we did a nice little micro analysis of Julia. So now we're going to turn to a fan favorite and
Wait,
Alicia,
we didn't talk about Michelle though.
No, we're going to talk about Michelle later. We
Fine.
talk about Julia.
There's
We're
a lot
following the
more to
episode chronologically.
There was a Michelle question that was not answered. Okay, it's fine.
Okay, trust me, there's gonna be a Michelle Aubrey blood feud later tonight, and that's gonna be exciting. But Alicia, we're gonna step aside from that. We're gonna talk about Ty. What in the world was Ty doing with that haphazard apology to Jason? Because to me, that was not good gameplay. It should have been an all-in apology or nothing. Or is Ty just too emotional? And I mean, I get it. Ty's like a hero, and we're gonna see him on Heroes versus Villains or whatever. But To me, that
Oh,
shows
that
something
was
lacking in his
totally,
game.
that was a totally like, I am Ty, and I will not be able to live with myself if I don't acknowledge and apologize, because then I can feel better about my decision. It wasn't actually an apology like meant for Jason so much as it was an apology meant for Ty's conscience. So that's probably why it wasn't super heartfelt, super thought out. And it was just kind of like making sure the words were said so he could be like, oh, okay, I acknowledge that. All right, we can move on.
And then he did kind of laugh about it afterwards, being like, and I still blindside you. Okay, I'm glad you see it kind of the way I do. Steven, you said you wanted to chime in because you're also very emotional.
Yes. So real quick, I think Jason should be grateful he even got an apology, considering all of the crap he did after Nick got voted out.
Damn.
I mean,
Steven, as like someone that just said, "Oh, this is a social game,"
But
doesn't.
it doesn't. But I'm saying Jason did not give the social goodwill in the first place, so he should be grateful that he got anything in return from Ty, who is clearly just this lovely, precious, angelic presence. Um, I got this from my friend Steve Fritz, but he told me Ty is what everyone perceived Yao-Man to be.
Very
Ty
Okay,
is
that's
this wonderful, heroic person. So I
but
wouldn't.
but
I'm
we
not going to
just
blame.
said.
Let
But
me
Steven, we just. Okay, go ahead, finish it. But I gotta make a point.
I was gonna say, I
Go
don't
ahead.
think it's necessarily bad of Ty to give a half-hearted apology to Jason. I think yes, like Alicia said, it was to sort of clear his conscience a bit, but I think he also did want to smooth things over with Jason to some degree. Otherwise, he
But the
wouldn't have talked to
fact
him at
that
all.
okay, but there was that degree though of him doing it for his self-servingness. So maybe Ty's not as angelic as we all think he is. Maybe he's a little bit more schemy, and he's just good at hiding it. Ty, I'm gonna let you comment on Ty, and then we are gonna move on.
well. Basically, I mean, you kind of hit it on the head. I think he wants to be. He's a mess. He's a great person. He's a terrible player. He is not. He accidentally outed the super idol thing without having to out that thing at all, and got the girls like it was just like, oops, I did this thing, and oops, I made Jason mad at me with my half-ass shitty apology, which I laughed about, which is great. Great television. Ty is great television. He's an emotional person. He is not a good player. He is dead next week. Dead.
But let's
See,
be honest,
man,
even
when
the
I was
most heartfelt apology from Ty would not have changed Jason's mind
No,
about
absolutely
no,
being
no,
torn
no,
and
no.
betrayed.
No, Jason's a dick.
yeah.
Doesn't
And speaking of which, I will say this though.
Yeah.
As much as Jason is a dick, he was actually kind of good at compressing his anger when he needed to be. And I really do think if Jason and Scott were separated for a little bit longer, or one of them went during the swap, the other one of them could have actually done a lot of damage in this game because they were both perceived as charming and nice. I mean, go watch Scott's Ponderosa video; it's really good.
Right.
Steven,
I was just
real
gonna
quick
I mean,
though.
Jason could still do damage.
I was gonna say with Jason being good at compressing his anger, I think when you go from pouring water on the fire, hiding the axe and the machete, being like passive aggressive to the nicest person in the season, yeah, that's definitely a big step up. So kudos to Jason for not being absolutely
Well,
horrendous
and I
in management, but I'm not gonna be
hold on,
so bold as to
but
say he did a great job not blowing up. Like
Yeah,
oh,
he
he
was
did.
totally Tia 2.0.
yeah, like
He was a cheap woman, but here's the thing though: sabotage, I think, wouldn't have even happened if one of Scott and/or Jason wasn't there. So I do think they brought out the worst in each other. And Ty, did you want to jump in on Jason?
Well, I mean, Jason is. There wasn't much, as far as I'm concerned, to comment on Jason tonight, other than the fact that they seem to go out of their way to not make him look super end tone to set up Julia going instead. Like Julia was the one who mentioned, eating the fucking chicken, and Jason was just like, oh, I got to do this for my family. Anytime they want to make him not look like a dick, they have him bring up the family. And they had him bring up the family at least once or twice tonight. He was fighting for them, and we're supposed to feel good that he's not gone.
So Ty, next week, if Jason gets a confessional saying "my family," we know he's safe.
Maybe, possibly. I mean, at some point, I don't think he wins. There's an outside chance that he could get to the end and lose. At this point, I think Ty's dead. I think Ty did not have a good episode. Ty was scared to death. Like immediately, he's just like I do my baseline ratings during the initial watch and then solidify them in the second watch. And I had him as possibly CP because he was at least explaining his rationale for doing what he did with Jason. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh my God, somebody said that they're going to tell somebody that they're voting for me. And he lost his fucking mind.
He didn't play his idol, though. He kept it under control.
He did play his idol,
sure,
but I actually think...
over the top, nestled right into Aubrey's power team.
This
was like, hey, mummy, do I have to vote?
What I think...
Do I have to use my idol this round? And then she was like, no.
What kills Ty.
By the way.
But that's what I'm saying, Ty. I think that's what actually kills Ty next week is the fact that now everyone's going to be going, oh, Aubrey and Ty are a power pair. We got to get him out. And then in order for Aubrey to get the jacket off her back, I think Ty gets tossed under the bus. Okay, does anyone else want to comment on this before we move on? Steven. I think he's frozen.
Nope.
Oh, he's there.
He shook his head.
Oh, all right. So, what I want to talk about next is the wonderful, kind of awkward reward challenge. So, I don't mind when there's a schoolyard pick and they leave someone out. I love it when they let the person that was left out, decide which kind of camp to back in terms of the challenge. But I do have to say it is kind of bullshit to have production to say no matter what, one person can't win the reward challenge. And I'm hoping they did that because they were trying to do like a water challenge and the waves were bad, and that this was like the backup challenge. But to me, that just didn't sit right, just leaving someone out of the challenge for no reason. Alicia, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, it would really suck to draw that one rock that meant you didn't even have like a dream of going to that reward. So I'm sure as Jason was sitting there, he was like, wow, lost my idol, my best ally last night, can't even get the reward today. I'm sure he was like, wow, luck has really forsaken me. But I don't know. I think it's kind of shitty.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was. And Ty, go ahead.
I'm running a television show that is supposed to be interesting. I have a thing where there are 3 pairs, and somebody has to be left out. And one of the people who could potentially be left out is a powder keg that does all sorts of crazy, stupid shit when he's angry. Gee, I definitely can't imagine why they would dangle that carrot out there to see what that son of a bitch would do. I mean, I understand, it's not the super fairest thing in the world, but, if they had gotten him to do anything nuts, it would have paid off in spades. I can see why they did it.
Okay, but even then, though, you have to understand.
I just think as a fan, when you imagine yourself, possibly being out there on the island and getting to experience all of these, as they kept saying this episode, once-in-a-lifetime experiences, it would just be such a huge, monumental letdown to not even get the chance to earn it.
Oh, sure. I mean, I'm sure it sucked for him, but I'm just saying I can see why it happened.
Well, and this to me, though, even though that has the potential to create drama, I don't like it when they create artificial drama like that. I don't like it when in Survivor, Caramone, okay, Brenda, you won the Family Award Challenge, take someone to go with you. Oh, guess what? Now that can all go away. I don't like those kind of, I guess it's because it's such a heavy-handed production, strike to the game.
Yeah.
Okay, so, anyways. We talked about that. We talked about the wonderful reward challenge. Real quick, Alicia, I want to talk about your favorite person left in this game, Joe. This episode
okay.
was absolutely pathetic. However, there was not really any confessionals or anything saying how pathetic he was and how
Are you talking about his performance overall this episode or just
this episode? Just this episode. It was just he's not there, he's not alive. So
when has he been there?
Don't talk to him this episode way more than normally.
He's a 71-year-old man and he's made the final 6, so I mean hey.
I think we've just seen him always be so doggedly no, I'm with the person I'm with, that there doesn't need to be any oh, let's check in with Joe and see if he's changed his mind, because clearly he fucking hasn't, because he's very set in his loyal ways, and so okay.
I guess that's a satisfactory answer. Ty, did you want to?
Joe is exactly what I've been saying he is since around the time that Anna got voted out. He is the old man. He's there. If anything interesting is going to happen to him, it's when he nearly dies. Otherwise, he's basically there to either get Aubrey her victory or to get third place with somebody else there or something. Like, his ceiling is third place. It's not like it's Bob Crowley where he's an under-the-radar, nice old man. He's got nothing. We don't have to care about him.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure he's a nice human being. I'm sure he'd be fun to be out there with. But
and all of his secret scenes show him as like a great guy and a great player, but he's just the one that got shafted by the edit. People get shafted by the edit every season, so
Purple Rick.
we know he's going to win. Yeah, Purple Rick, I think, was a
wasn't
pretty...
the secret scene last week just him getting in a fight with a chicken?
I
didn't watch
Does
that.
that make him a good player? I mean, Jesus H. Christ.
when I say good player, I mean like he is actually thinking coherently about the game. It doesn't necessarily mean he's putting himself. Okay. Hashtag Mark the Chicken. That's all we're going to say about that. So, the big thing coming from tonight, Michelle had a pretty good episode. Steven's a huge Aubrey fan.
I am.
And Aubrey, I think, also had a pretty decent episode. Now, next week, if Aubrey is not out, I'm going to have egg all over my face because I said Aubrey would be out by next week. However, I also said Ty would be out within the next 2 episodes.
Oh,
So there's no way I'm not having egg on my face. And I'm much more likely to think that Ty goes next week than anything. But Aubrey, make the case. I'm sorry, Steven, make the case that Aubrey is getting the winner edit. And then Ty, you're going to make a case for why Michelle's getting the winner edit. And let's try to keep it somewhat succinct, okay, guys? So, Steven, you're first. Why is Aubrey getting this winner's edit? And it can't just be because you like her. It can't just be because of that.
I know. So I think Aubrey's word has been taken at pretty much face value in this game with the edit. I think people are saying, like, the edit's like, Aubrey saying this is happening, it happens. It's like Aubrey's almost, I don't want to say like God, but like they're giving Aubrey a lot of credit with this. I'm not saying Michelle isn't, but I'm saying Aubrey's had this really just overarching story of overcoming the odds with her first episode, people being like, she's toast, she's screwed, and now she's arguably in the best position in the game, and yeah, I mean, my one concern with Aubrey is that her winner's edit is too, rather, if she was a winner, it's too...
Okay, but Steven, real quick, and just going back in Survivor history, how many players that have that early day 1, day 2, day 3 breakdown actually do go on to win the game?
Yeah, that's a good point. So
okay, so Ty, I guess you're going to rebuff Aubrey real quick and talk about Michelle.
Why, Sari, you look slightly whiter than you did before, and you have a nice cut on your leg. That's what you're looking at. Aubrey is your 4th place finisher. Michelle pretty much cemented tonight, as far as I'm concerned, that she's the #1 contender. She had all sorts of discussion. Like, last week, Billy Garcia was like, oh, nobody's going to win who hasn't done anything. All of a sudden, she shows up. She talks about all of her social bonds that she's making. Aubrey and Sydney both talk about how they totally trust her. Sydney and Michelle were basically making the decision tonight. Aubrey had the smart idea to get rid of Julia rather than Jason. But Michelle and Sydney were basically your decision makers tonight, and you're in a situation where we know that Sydney is not particularly loved by the old Bronze, and people talk about her being a little bit more standoffish. That's been mentioned in, Ponderosa stuff. Mm-hmm. Michelle made her big move tonight. She had to choose whether or not to cut the cord with Julia. She did it, and I think is in a much better position to have everyone's back moving forward, like everyone having her back moving forward. There is no way she gets voted out before Ty does, because Ty is just such an obvious jury threat because he's, so ridiculously lovable, even though he's not good at the game at all. Michelle is your winner. She stood up tonight. She had her big Natalie episode. There's your winner.
Now, and I guess what I want to know is, and Tyler and Steven, and I'm going to jump to you, Alicia, on this, what's Sydney's role in all this? Tyler, are you just going to say Sydney's second? Sydney's second with 2 votes on the jury. Is that where you
There's a chance that Sydney could emerge. I mean, she's been neck and neck with Michelle, I felt, for most of the merge. At this point, given what we're seeing, Sydney's just talking about the game, whereas Michelle is making those social bonds. You'll recall, and I've been mentioning this in all of my columns throughout the season, Probst hit on emotional intelligence early on. I don't know that Sydney has that. Michelle has been shown to have that.
And that's fair. And going to that, Alicia, I want to hear your thoughts on it. And keeping in mind, though, like what Ty said, Sydney has been kind of stringing along, like, Jason, like, oh, we're going to vote with you. And I think that could potentially hurt her shot at getting Jason's jury vote in the end. What's your take on Sydney?
Um, I think that we as an audience know that Sydney is strategic and and like constantly smart and thinking about things. Obviously, also that she's a like a huge competitive threat. Um, and she does seem to get people to like her a lot and trust her, and maybe she doesn't always keep those bonds like we saw with old Braun, but she is able to create those bonds and keep them. I just think maybe at the end she might have trouble showing all the facets of her game, like in a very concise, like strong message to the jury. I think that might be where she ends up stumbling because she can't actually convince them of all of these different pieces of her game.
And
We've seen in her confessionals that she kind of is all over the place. Or we haven't actually seen her confessionals where
yeah.
she's all over the place because they keep them as like deleted scenes because they don't even use them because they're not.
Now, and Alicia, and
not
I think
useful.
almost playing to that, picturing a situation where Michelle is sitting next to Sydney, the fact that Sydney was almost constantly dominating and on the right side of the vote could hurt her because Michelle can just say, "Hey Jason, hey Scott, hey Nick, I was even on the bottom and I was able to use my social strength to get myself all the way to the top." And if Sydney can't articulate, her strategy with Michelle saying, "Hey, I was at the bottom and I fought my way to the top," that could be just the right combination to get her to vote. Steven.
And it could be.
Oh, go
I'm
ahead,
kind of
Alicia.
in the weird camp where I don't. Tonight is the first time where I've seen, oh, Michelle did something and now I'm impressed with her. Every other episode leading up to this, I have not been impressed with Michelle. So it's kind of weird to me to think that she's like such a strong contender when this is the only. I'm like, oh, she like cut off like her strongest ally and best friend. Like I can respect that, but I haven't really been able to respect anything else.
Okay, go ahead, Ty, real quick.
We all know how Probst loves it when females win Survivor. I am not surprised that Michelle has had a quiet edit up until my whole argument as to why she has been the quintessential female winner in Survivor is because she's been relatively quiet. They show just enough about her saying fuck off to the men for being like douches and hiding things. I'm going to go ahead and open up coconuts anyway. Like little bits like that to remind you that she's there so that all of a sudden when the reason she wins happens, you notice it and you remember, oh, right, she wasn't worthless the whole time. So that Probst can try to pretend that he's not a chauvinist douchebag.
So Ty, and anyone else can answer this too, including Steven, who appears to be texting. I hope she's cute. Anyways, did we see Michelle's moment why she wins tonight, or is that moment coming later?
It could come next week. I feel like it's a two-parter. Like I feel like her and Sydney
It's the Michelle
together.
Ty Aubrey vote.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Steven, what is your take on Michelle's actual shot at winning? Are you still on the Aubrey train? And you can be. We can leave this as a cliffhanger until next week.
So I'm on the Aubrey train as in that I want her to win, but I in actuality, outside of being devil's advocate, I do believe she is the quote fan favorite final juror that we're expected to get, because I feel like we're getting hit too hard over the head with Aubrey's edit if she does win. As much as I would love it, we just had Jeremy, we just had Mike, had Tyson. Tyson wasn't super obvious, but he wasn't hidden.
And what do all those men have in common? Oh right, that's how they fucking get edited on Survivor with Probst. And Probst loved all of those seasons.
Yeah. And Natalie Natalie's the most recent female winner, right?
Yeah.
Natalie. Okay.
Yeah.
And she was very quiet up until I don't know, around the merge she got some airtime, and then once Jeremy left it was obvious. But yeah, she was kind of toned down a bit too.
But she was also on a prior show, so a lot of the fans had some idea of who she was.
Mm-hmm.
With Aubrey, I feel like we're being shown so much of her that, and plus I feel like Probst likes her so much that if she won, Probst would be like singing this season to high heaven. Like Aubrey is like incredible, et cetera, and I mean love her, but I don't see it happening. So I do think Michelle, as Ty said, is getting that quintessential female winner at it.
And we will have more answers to all these questions next week, where it's going to be even more exciting. Either way, I'm going to have egg on my face. Everyone's happy about that, right?
Totally.
Alicia's like, no, not really, totally. Okay, so before we wrap things up, does anyone have any last little comments they want to make about tonight's episode? The answer is no. All right, so I want to thank you so much, Ty. I want to thank you, Steven, and I want to thank you, my wonderful co-host, who's probably still a little bit mad at me for starting the show early, Alicia. And I want to thank everyone watching. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
All right.